Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Casey Council meeting of the 21st of May. My name is Nolene Duff and I'm the Chair of the panel of administrators here at the City of Casey, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all here this afternoon. I'd like to start with introductions. First of all, Mr Miguel Belmar.
Good afternoon, Chair.
And Mr Cameron Boardman.
Good afternoon, Chair.
The three of us being the panel of administrators, and the officers here present this afternoon. Mr Glenn Patterson, our Chief Executive Officer, James Collins, Director, City Planning and Infrastructure, Steve Coldham, Director, Community Life, Jen Bednar, Director, Customer and Corporate Services, and we are supported this afternoon by Matthew Crane on AV and Nicole Road in Governance. And I welcome all the other officers that are here this afternoon in the gallery. I'd like to start with the statement of acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to the elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The diversity statement. The City of Casey is home to remarkable diversity, with many cultures, languages, faiths and communities of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community story. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. Now move to item 2, which is the confirmation of minutes of the council meeting on the 16th of April 2024. Can I have a mover and a seconder to confirm the minutes of this meeting?
I'll move those.
Thank you, Mr Belmar.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. All in favour? Carried. Item 3, declaration of interests. I've considered my obligations under Section 130 of the Local Government Act 2020 and have no conflicts to declare. Do my colleague administrators or any officers have any conflicts to declare?
Nothing to declare.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Chair, I have a matter to declare, which is not a personal conflict, but a matter to declare with respect to the library item, and I'll be making a declaration at that time.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. We'll duly note that. Mr Coldham.
Yeah, through you, Chair, I similarly have an interest for 5.2 as a board member on the libraries.
Thank you. We'll also note that. Now move to item 4, which is public question time. There are 12 public questions submitted regarding a variety of matters, 9 of these from 5 submitters concerning the Doveton Pool in the park, and there'll be a consolidated response with regard to that matter. But I will hand over to the Chief Executive Officer with regard to responses to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The first question has been submitted by Mel Smith. Sadly, the City of Casey has one of the highest DV statistics all across Victoria, and as a volunteer, I'm concerned for my safety. What will the Council do to address this problem, especially at a grassroots level, where mechanisms are lacking and some men contribute to a problematic culture for women? Mr Coldham will respond to that question.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Mel. The City of Casey has a long-standing commitment to promoting gender equality and preventing violence against women. The Safe and Equal Casey strategic plan is a 10-year plan to support gender equity and the prevention of violence against women in Casey. The plan considers the role of council in primary prevention of family violence and details our commitment to working towards long-term systematic and structural change. The focus is on building relationships, co-designing projects with communities across Casey. Volunteering Victoria has resources available to assist volunteers that have concerns or problems with the organisations they are volunteering with. We encourage you to reach out to them to discuss any of your safety concerns.
The next question has been submitted by Tanya Jones. I'm a Timbara P9 parent, urging your support for expanding our school to P12. Limited high school options and overcrowding schools demand action. This extension would alleviate strain on infrastructure, meet community demand and ensure quality education for all. Please guide us through the process, and there's an attachment to their petition. So my question is, how can or will Council help to advocate for this extension? And Mr Collins will respond.
Thanks, Tanya. The delivery and planning of schools is the responsibility of the Victorian State Government. Factors such as population, forecasted future need and the demographics are considered by the Department of Education when it comes to selecting locations for schools. Council's role is planning for the schools is limited to local government matters such as traffic management and the connection with other council assets such as recreation spaces or community facilities. We are committed to advocating for infrastructure that meets the needs of our growing and changing community. In this instance, we recommend that this is submitted to your local Member of Parliament.
The next question has been submitted by Mr Colin Hampton regarding a cabin cruiser on Nature Strip. Congratulations to the Bylaws Department for having removed the cabin cruiser that has been stored on the Nature Strip at East for the last 18 months. Unfortunately, it is now being stored on the road adjacent to the aforementioned Nature Strip, again contrary to the Council's local law. How long is it going to be stored there? And Mr Colton will respond.
As previously advised, Council has received no complaints of Nature Strip parking in this street in the past month. Officers will continue to monitor the area and undertake any enforcement activities where appropriate.
The next question regards the Doveton Pool upgrade design, and it's to do with the removal of small pools and a slide, the cost and heating of the pool. And as you referenced earlier, Chair, this is a consolidated answer to Mr Paul Tanner, Josh Oostwood, Steven Kuman, Angela Manjasak and John Hicks. And Mr Collins will respond.
When developing the Doveton Pool in the Park Master Plan, Council undertook community engagement from March to May in 2021. As part of this engagement, the concept of a new park at the site was tested with the community, including the removal of the 50-metre pool. Community feedback captured a strong sentiment to retain the 50-metre pool while supporting year-round elements such as a park and water play. To achieve this, a decision was then made to retain the 50-metre pool and create a smaller park to accommodate the feedback received and also meet the identified gap in district-level parks. The park will be designed in alignment with the provisions set out in Council's open space strategy, and that is to create the park, the smaller pools and slides will be decommissioned. The existing splash pad will form part of a new year-round accessible park, which will be free to the public and accessible to people of all ages and abilities. As part of Council's revitalisation works at Doveton Pool in the Park, there will be a number of activations and programs offered at the aquatics facility to ensure the 50-metre pool will provide a service to people of all ages and abilities, including young children and their families. The park will also provide a variety of opportunities for people of all ages and abilities to recreate. The adopted Doveton Pool in the Park Master Plan seeks to balance demonstrated community need, maximise community usage for a range of activities year-round, and recognise practical realities of funding such assets for the community. At the Council meeting on the 19th of March, Council endorsed a staged delivery of the Doveton Pool in the Park Master Plan, which includes funding Stage 1. Due to the age of the pools and slides, Stage 1 prioritises rebuilding the outdoor 50-metre pool, which will be heated, retention of the existing shade sails and covered grassed areas, decommissioning of the program pool, the toddler pool, slides and the Gambetta room. Fencing will also be changed to create new open spaces for public access. The existing splash pad will be made available for public access and interim filling treatments will be made to decommission the program and toddler pools to make them usable public spaces. Full delivery of the district level park is subject to external funding. Council will continue to advocate to state and federal government to seek funding commitments to deliver the future stages.
The final question is also in relation to Doveton Pool in the Park, and it's submitted by Josh Oostwood. Do you plan to house a social enterprise cafe, cleaning business or other social enterprise at Doveton Pool? And again, Mr Collins will respond.
There are no plans identified in the master plan for a social enterprise opportunity at the site.
That concludes the public questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Patterson. We'll now move on to item 5, officer reports, and I move to item 5.1, the quarterly community report, January to March 2024. Do I have a mover for the recommendation on page 4?
Chair, I'll move that recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, as you have pointed out, we're moving a recommendation to endorse the quarterly community report for the first quarter of the calendar year 2024 from January to March. We have remarked a number of occasions on these quarterly reports the comprehensive nature and the structure of the reports themselves, which contain our progress against our 7 strategic objectives, and I'm going to cite a number of examples shortly around the progress, the actions that ourselves as administrators have taken over the quarter, our progress against our capital works budgets, and also vital information of financial disclosure, which supplements the budget and other financial reports that we release in a public capacity. It is a report that, from a community perspective, discloses quite comprehensively the actions and achievements that we have adopted consistent with the council plan, and one which I believe provides quite a high degree of clarity and easy to interpret and understand information to provide that information to the community based upon, as I said, those achievements in the council plans. There have been 37 actions that we have articulated in this quarterly report, 34 of which are in progress, 2 are complete, and 1 action is deferred. And specifically against the council plans, the strategic objectives and the actions, there are a number of which are of specific note. If we look at strategic objective 1, and I don't plan to go into extensive detail, but there are a number which are noteworthy, Chair. But strategic objective 1 is quite simply to deliver sustainable infrastructure and activate places. And under strategy 1.2, which is foster partnerships and ensure Casey remains a destination for arts, culture, sports and leisure, anyone reading the report will see that it has been a very busy quarter insofar as the BMX Victoria Track Attack, the Eltham Dandenong Basketball Tournament, the AFL pre-season games down at Casey Fields. Melbourne played Richmond. There was over 7,000 attendees to that, which is quite a significant endorsement of the quality of the infrastructure down there, and also the community interest and participation in that facility overall. We had the Cricket Australia State competition, the Victorian HPV Grand Prix Series, which was over 3,000 attendees. But I think what was really quite interesting, which is a point that I'll touch on in a moment, but the Macca's City Cup soccer tournament had over 300 teams and 50,000 spectators across the weekend, again down at Casey Fields. It was quite an extraordinary level of community participation, one which shows that the investment in Casey Fields is really meeting community expectation and shows that the growth of soccer, or more politically correct, football, as my colleague would correct me on, is something that this community in the southeast of Melbourne more broadly should be very proud of. So a busy activities calendar, one which is providing a significant amount of community interest and participation, and it must be noted, particularly focused at young people and women and girls and those from ethnic and culturally diverse communities. I move to strategic objective 2, which is growing Casey's current and emerging sector. And specifically, I want to make mention of an initiative that ourselves as administrators are deeply involved in under strategy 2.2, build and leveraging partnerships to enhance service provision, infrastructure delivery and funding opportunities. Specifically, this is the progress that we've reported against the revitalisation of council-owned land in this precinct, in the Bunjil Place precinct, and the endorsement in the last quarter of the concept master plan over this precinct. It is something that we have been, as administrators, providing leadership guidance, working with the officers quite specifically over what we see the future use of this particular piece of land, and also those stakeholders, both private and otherwise, who will be an integral part of what happens to this precinct in the future. Strategic objective number 3, we mentioned specifically the progress that the council achieved under the strategy 3.2 and 3.3 around achievements towards a circular economy, particularly in relation to the procurement of an advanced waste processing solution and also the implementation of the waste curbside reform program. Two state government initiatives, both have got significant implications on this municipality and neighbouring municipalities. These require an integrated approach, not just from a Casey perspective, but from the 14 other councils that are affected, particularly in the advanced waste processing solution. I do note the leadership and the participation of our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Patterson, in that particular process, and that this is something that undoubtedly will have long-term impacts and arguably benefits to the community as a whole once we do get to a process of implementing the policy and the other infrastructure requirements. Strategic Objective 4 is the advocacy under our council plan to state and federal governments. We've mentioned that in the public questions around Doveton Pool in the Park and the ongoing advocacy we are providing to the state and the Commonwealth Government around that, but also in relation to a number of the infrastructure projects, Thompson Road Extension, Casey Field Soccer Stage 3, for example, which we'll talk about in a moment, that yourself and myself, Chair, were attending, participated over the recent opening of Stage 2 of Melbourne City's headquarters down there. But it is an ongoing project and one that we have to provide that advocacy and leadership to both tiers of government to ensure adequate funding and that the municipality of Casey receives its fair share. There are just two other quick highlights I want to make in relation to the quarterly report, Chair, and one which is quite pertinent for this council meeting, and this is relating specifically to Strategic Objective 6, ensuring good governance and transparent decision making. We have highlighted our achievements against the Community Leadership Program, which is a program we've been running for 3 years now. It has been running for, I think, the 4th time this year. Some very high calibre and impressive community leaders, both young and old, of various ethnicities and genders, genuinely deeply connected to their communities and wanting to further serve. And that has really been, I think, a highlight of our tenure to be not just participants and observers, but hopefully we have made a small contribution ourselves to the development of those individuals. But specifically, and this is where I'll leave my comments in relation to this quarterly report, and I will be making some further comments at agenda item 5.3, that against Strategic Objective 6.2, we continue to identify opportunities to improve better council decision making through governance and community engagement. And at agenda item 5.3 this afternoon, we will be adopting a recommendation around councillor code of conducts and also the use of new protocols for councillors' involvements in planning decisions. We have specifically, and in quite a significant amount of detail, put our response in relation to the IBAC Operation Sandon report. We have articulated where we ourselves have made recommendations against the consultation paper that recently came out from the Minister for Local Government around reforms to strengthen council leadership capacity, councillor conduct, the plans to improve early intervention and effective dispute resolution as it relates to councillor conduct, and the reforms to strengthen oversight mechanisms. This is a vitally important part of our role as we prepare for the transition to elected councillors, and one that ourselves as administrators are taking a very detailed and heightened and personal involvement with to ensure that we provide the necessary infrastructure, the necessary guidelines and necessary policies and protocols that those who occupied these seats post-October this year understand their obligations, comply with their obligations and meet the expectations of the community as a whole. So with those highlights, Chair, I do thank council staff involved in compiling this document. It is something that does provide, I believe, some significant insight into operations and how we measure our performance against our stated strategic objectives, and one that I encourage all members of the Casey community to read with interest.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second this motion and thank Mr Boardman for his thorough comments that referred to each of the strategies. I just want to highlight a couple of matters, and firstly I want to thank those members of council who have prepared this report. As usual, it's prepared in a very easy to read manner and contains significant information. I want to note that in Strategic Objective 1, the delivery of sustainable infrastructure and active places, the finalisation of the construction of major infrastructure projects, including Casey Fields, the Max Pawsey Stormwater Harvesting and Wetland, Pearsdale Recreation Reserve, Robert Booth Recreation Reserve Pavilion, and the Clyde Township Family and Community Centre. In particular, I want to note the comments in the text of this item, which refers to the fact that Council has, on two of those projects, and in particular the Pearsdale Recreation Reserve project and the Clyde Township Family and Community Centre. Due to the exigencies of the time, Council has had to step in and ensure that those projects are able to be completed. And I just want to ensure the community that at all times we have been advised, and I want to thank those council staff who keep us advised of situations where council needs to be fully appraised of issues occurring with contracts, and those matters, as always, as they were on these occasions, are appropriately dealt with, and appropriate action is taken to ensure that projects are able to be completed. I want to note also the comments of Mr. Boardman with respect to the implementation of the recommendations coming out of Operation Sandon, and we'll be saying more about that later. But I also note in a Strategic Objective 6, the ensuring good governance and transparent decision making, two issues that really point towards the fact that later in the year we are returning to an elected council. The first of those is the community leadership programs that have been run by council, and noting that they are occurring again. And also, Chair, and I note that you have in particular spoken at these forums, and they are forums directed towards those members of the community who are intending to stand for council. And I want to note that the work that is being done with respect to that fundamentally important strategic objective. Finally, and I'll say more about this in the next item, I just want to note the work that's been done with respect to the opening of Cranbourne West of a library centre, and I'll say more about that in a moment. And I just want to note, Chair, the engagement that we administrators have had with the community, in the specific ones that are noted here, at the Australian Day Citizenship Ceremony, the multiple citizenship ceremonies that have occurred during the quarter, the Casey Community Awards, the Casey Business Breakfast, which is always a fantastic event, and also the Malaysian Council of Victoria Ramadan Appreciation Dinner, and as I mentioned a moment ago, the Cranbourne West Community Hub Library Lounge, which was opened in February. So with those comments, and again thanking the members of staff who prepare what is always a very easy to read report, I'm happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar, and thank you both for leaving a lot for me to say on this item. You've been both extremely comprehensive, but I have found one thing that I can comment on, and that is the local government electoral representation review undertaken by the Victorian Electoral Commission. Made their recommendations to the Minister, and the Minister has adopted 12 single wards for the future representation of the City of Casey. So that is also an important step towards elected representatives. With that, I'll move to the vote. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 5.2 is the Connected Libraries Annual Budget and Corporate Plans. Do I have a mover and seconder?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. In moving this item, I note that I make the following declaration. I wish to declare that I have an interest in this item as a council representative on Connected Libraries. I do not receive any personal advantage from being on that board. It's not considered a conflict of interest and is exempt under Section 129 g of the Local Government Act 2020. Having made that formal declaration, Chair. Tonight, there are 4 recommendations that are before this council meeting. They relate to approval of the following documents: the Connected Libraries draft budget for the next financial year, the Connected Libraries draft library plan for 2021-25, which has been updated, and the Connected Libraries draft strategic resource plan for 2024-2028. And noting also the document being the Connected Libraries Facility Development Plan 2023 to 2027, which has been updated. And I note also that the motion refers specifically to the amount of the contribution which is being made by Council to Connected Libraries. Can I begin by ensuring the community that since the Casey Hardinia Library Corporation ceased operation and began as Connected Libraries, the library is going from strength to strength. It is a fantastic resource for the community. Clearly, the most obvious branch is the one that we have here at Bunjil. But of course, as the community knows, we have branches here at Bunjil, at Cranbourne Library, at Doveton, at Endeavour Hills, at Hampton Park, and I've already made reference to it, but earlier this year the Cranbourne West Library Lounge was launched. And I just want to momentarily just focus on that last one, the Cranbourne West Library Lounge. And that is a fantastic new facility, which is a creative way of using an existing council facility to create a lounge of over 100 square metres in size, with over 3.5 items available for loan, as well as the entire collection being available for loan through the lockers, which are available at that site, and which I have been advised at earlier library meetings that the lockers are functioning pretty much at capacity. So that's a fantastic use of a resource and a very constructive and creative way of using an existing council facility to partner with Connected Libraries to ensure that the resources are available out in the community where people are, and not always requiring that they step here to Bunjil. I want to note also, as I said, we're adopting a number of documents tonight apart from the budget, and I just want to momentarily reflect on the strategic resource plan for 2024-2028, which was endorsed at a meeting of the library in April. And I just want to share momentarily with the community the values of Connected Libraries, the vision, the mission, and our values and guiding behaviour. And they include the following. They include creativity, fairness, a love of learning, social intelligence, teamwork, and humour. And so that's really the guiding principles of Connected Libraries. And it's fantastic to see that all that interaction and humour being one of the values and guiding behaviours for our libraries. So if you hear people laughing at the library, don't get upset with them. They are fulfilling the values of the organisation. I also, just turning more particularly to the budget, I note that the budget for the upcoming year does make provision for the fact that an EBA enterprise agreement expired last November and has been the subject of application to the Fair Work Commission, and that has been taken into account in the budget for the upcoming financial year. So I want to assure the community that that the financial planning that is occurring is absolutely at the cutting edge of governance, and I want to thank the financial team at at the library for ensuring that that is occurring. So with those comments and giving the community being able to give the community the information that the library is functioning well, that the board is functioning well, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Thank you, Chair. And before I make some specific comments, I want to acknowledge Mr Belmar and Mr Coleman, your involvement in what can only really be described as an extraordinarily successful transition from CCL to Connected Libraries. We've spoken about this issue a number of times over the last few years. There were a number of complexities, and legislative, structurally, staff-based, infrastructure-based. And I know that both of you, and supported by Mr Coldham's team, have worked extensively and comprehensively to achieve what undoubtedly has now been a new successful organisation. And I think if we look at today around the budget, the updated 2024 plan, the strategic resources plan, looking at future capital works proposals, and the facilities development plan, this really is the combination of, I think, a number of years of really hard work, and from mine, and I'm sure, Chair, you share this sentiment. We do firmly place on the record the amount of work you've done to meet the expectation and to ensure that what is a vital council service and an impressive council service continues to function to meet community expectations successfully and as significantly as it should. I have taken the liberty of reviewing the documents based upon the advice provided in the officer's report, and very satisfied with the direction that the library has taken. I do note that we're not just simply talking about a library, and one thing that really stood out for me, and I preface my comments by saying that I have had the pleasure of taking a number of people through the Bunjil facility for the first time who otherwise would not have come out to the southeast. Their words are quite comprehensively wow in response to it. It is undoubtedly an extraordinarily impressive facility, not just architecturally, not just with the facilities, and the staff themselves are just absolutely so engaged and terrific, but it is a really welcoming, enjoyable space, and it deserves every accolade that it receives. And notwithstanding the facilities at Endeavour Hills, at Doveton, at Cranbourne and Hampton Park, and most recently at Cranbourne East, there is incorporated in the facilities development plans capital works improvements to look at the future use of those libraries. Cranbourne is something that we are looking through the lens of potentially integrating into a hub type of approach and looking at end of life and other aspects, but the reality is that each one of these libraries are seeing quite clearly increased patronage, increased borrowing, increased usage by the community, and it is our obligation to meet the expectations of the community by providing continual investment and articulating what is the clear program for the future around these facilities and how they are going to continue to meet community needs into the future. And this is what these reports tonight provide. But just to conclude, Chair, where I started around the services and not just saying that it is simply a library, if we go to 5.5 in the library plan itself, it talks about that, yes, there is an extensive library collection that provides the community with access to a wide range of physical and electronic items, fiction, non-fiction, books, magazines, newspapers, audio, supporting literature, reading, learning, information and leisure, that always needs to be updated, always needs to be contemporary, always needs to be ensuring that there are aspects within the library that meet community expectations, and the cost and the improvement aspects are incorporated and fully disclosed in the budget. But what we forget about is the other services and facilities. There's an extraordinary events program that the library runs around English education, around study, Indigenous engagements, children literacy, diversity and inclusion, social connection, looking at digital literacy programs, mental health and wellbeing, all provided to the community through other community support programs through these facilities, all of which, for the most part, provided free of charge. And from what I've read in the reports, are very well attended and do provide that exceptional interface and interaction with the community as a whole. There are resources and support for our culturally and linguistically diverse communities, including English conversation classes, preparation for citizenship tests, and also providing culturally safe spaces, which is a necessary requirement in our culturally diverse community. I've already touched on the digital literacy programs, but there's also free Wi-Fi, there's public internet PCs, there's sessions to help the community use this technology in day-to-day interactions and provide the education, particularly to more senior members of our communities who may not necessarily be as technologically literate as perhaps some of those who work in the industry. There is a whole lot of direct delivery of library services to household and other community members, but specifically in addition to the events, the outdoor events and the programs, there's also something which I've utilised myself as an extraordinarily entertaining and wonderful school holiday program, and one which I see that is incredibly well attended by members of the community. So it's not just a library with books and magazines and newspapers, this is an integrated space that provides a range of community facilities, and one which the entire municipality and community of Casey should rightly be proud of. And again, I thank Mr Belmar, Mr Coldham and all of the library team for the work that they do, not just here at Bunjil, but in the other 5 spaces, and really look forward to seeing this aspect of council improve and become even more successful in the future.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'd just also like to acknowledge the independent chair of our library services, Penny Holloway, and the CEO of the library, Beth Lupino. I think that they have also provided tremendous leadership through this transition in concert with our colleague, Mr Belmar, and the staff team here at the City of Casey. The library service, as you've outlined, Mr Boardman, is a most extensively used service, one of the highest throughput services that council provides, with a contribution of over $7 million a year. Very highly used, highly valued service, and one that we are strongly committed to and will continue to be committed to. I move to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.3, the endorsement of corporate governance documents. Quite a hefty and extensive set of documents and reports. Do I have a mover and a seconder?
Chair, I will move the various recommendations at item 5.3.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second.
Mr Belmar, and we're looking now at page 127 of the council reports. Thank you, Mr Boardman.
And Chair, as you have articulated, there is over 300 pages of documents which really form the most integral part of the expectation of councillors post our exit from this place in October of this year. These documents, specifically the Councillor Code of Conduct and the protocols for council's land use planning policy, are must-reads. They're not nice things to have. We haven't gone through as comprehensive a process, as I'll articulate shortly, to simply be ensuring that we comply with our statutory obligations. This is the how-to guide. This is the what-to-do guide. This is the expectation guide. This is what anybody who sits in this place needs to understand, needs to adhere to, needs to adapt their professional and personal conduct to, and ensure that they understand the principles and the requirements in these documents so that they can perform this role professionally, ethically, integrally, and again, in the best interests of the community. And it is very timely. I do start with some legislative change, which has been introduced to the Parliament only this month. It's the Local Government Amendment, Governance and Integrity Bill of 2024. The Minister for Local Government, Minister Melissa Horne, moved a second reading speech on the 1st of May, and she made specific reference to not just what we are adopting today, but specific reference around all of those aspects that I have just articulated, insofar as the expectation of councillors post the election period in October of this year. And I want to quote 2 specific aspects from the Minister's second reading speech. The Minister is saying that In early 2024, the local government sector had the opportunity to provide feedback on the proposed reforms by the local government reform consultation paper. We made reference of this, I think, in our February council meeting, around the consultation paper, and our response to the consultation paper around the proposed model code of conduct and other reforms. The minister's gone on to talk about that this legislation now adopts a model code of conduct, but has done so in the auspice of what's come out of the IBAC Operation Standard and Special Report. The minister specifically references that the IBAC Operation Standard Special Report made a number of recommendations to improve council governance, which the government has accepted in principle, and 7 of those specific recommendations are implemented throughout this legislation. So whilst we have, I'd say, Chair, been somewhat ahead of the curve for understandable reasons because of the reason why we were appointed ministers in the first place, it is really pleasing to say, and I firmly place on the record, the appreciation, the acknowledgement to the state government for enacting the recommendations that came out of Operation Sand, and a number of those recommendations through this vital legislative change. It was an all-encompassing review of this organisation where several individuals, some sitting around the table, were involved professionally. But it is pleasing that we now are at the stage of seeing those recommendations coming to fruition and are being incorporated in what we're about to hopefully adopt very shortly. So I want to specifically talk about this insofar as what it actually means. And I do so from the lens, Chair, that this is a process that we have been deeply involved in, and one that I think fairly has occupied a considerable amount of our time over the last few months for understandable reasons. Most specifically is that we've wanted to get this right. We don't want to create a situation where there is an overburden of expectation or behaviour or conduct. There's got to be fairness. There is no aspect of this which is trying to curtail debate or to limit open and transparent conversation and the healthy exchange of ideas. We are purely dealing with conduct and behaviour. We are dealing with professional expectations which are absolutely expected in any workplace anywhere in the country, but articulating it to a point that councils are informed of their obligations, understand their obligations and adhere to that. And I think this is where there has been those failings in the past, which clearly were endemically presented throughout the Operation Sandon investigation and subsequently affirmed through its recommendations. So I've spoken about the consultation paper that was circulated in January 24. We have gone into significant detail at past council meetings around our response to that consultation paper, and now we are in a stage of looking at our specific adoption of the model code of conduct with some unique Casey issues incorporated into that, which we identified as a consequence of the Operation Standard recommendations, which have now been ratified by the legislative change. Specifically what we are doing, and this is a very long recommendation, is we are looking at the instrument of authority, the section 11.1 instrument of authority, which is a very comprehensive document which articulates the individual statutory responsibilities of everyone within this organisation. Vis-a-vis, they may have responsibilities under the Food Act, they may have responsibilities under the Planning and Environment Act, they may have responsibilities under the Road Management Act, etc. This is a very significant document which articulates the statutory responsibility of every individual applicable in this organisation to ensure that those statutory alignments with the roles, responsibilities and duties based upon the Chief Executive Officer's delegations are clearly and transparently displayed in this document, but most importantly, meet those statutory considerations. So the first thing we are adopting is this very comprehensive document, which really goes into the individual alignment to all of those relevant acts of parliament that apply to the municipality case in other local governments, but specifically as it relates from a local government administrative perspective. We're adopting the Councillor Code of Conduct, which is a Councillor Code of Conduct that meets the model requirements, but has some unique overtures, as I've said, that are applicable from recommendations that came out of Operation Standard. We're adopting the protocol for councillors' land use policy. This is an attachment of 5.31, which sets the expectations around councillors' decision-making as it relates to planning decisions, and particularly references the reason why, if there is a recommendation that council officers have made that the council themselves do not agree with and or seek to change or in any way amend or call in, that those reasons are recorded. They are specifically articulated within the confines of the meeting, and that there is a significant record kept of the reasons behind that to ensure, again, the transparency, the alignment with statutory obligations, but most importantly, that councillors know that they need to adhere through these protocols before they enter this chamber. We are, as a consequence of these two policies, revoking two current policies. That's the Growth Area Infrastructure Agreements Revised Reporting and Approval Process, and we're also revoking the Growth Area Infrastructure Agreements Principles for Infrastructure Project Delivery. Those two revocations have been incorporated into the protocols for councillor land use policies. Chair, it is quite a significant document. I have some specific aspects of both the Councillor Code of Conduct and the Protocol for Councillors' Land Use Policy that I want to mention, and I'll do so very briefly because it could take some time to get through the whole document for obvious reasons because of the comprehensive nature of them. But I do want to talk specifically around, under the land use planning protocols for councillors, the policy under clause 4 as it relates to request to councillors for advice and information from parties. This is one of the issues that came up in the Operation Standards around unsolicited approaches to councillors from developers around specific proposals and other aspects of council administration, where arguably there was conduct that did not meet statutory expectations. There was conduct that clearly has been articulated in the final report from Operation Standard, which breached certain conduct provisions and conduct which undoubtedly had a deleterious effect on the administration of this organisation. And what this policy does, particularly as it relates to clause 4, to set the standards and expectations, to provide clarity around the role of council laws with any interaction whatsoever with developers or anyone involved in the development community, around what their expectations are, how they transmit any information, any conversations, any interaction that they have had with anyone involved in that community to council officers, and how they very much have an arm's length approach to their conduct. And it specifically says that quite bluntly, that if any request are made to councillors from any party seeking information or advice, that is referred, a councillor's obligation is to refer that individual to the website, to the customer service or the Office of Council. The councillor is not in any way able to purport to provide land use or other planning advice whatsoever. It couldn't be more clear. And I think that if we're looking at where councillors in the past have probably got themselves into a little bit of confusion around these particularly statutory obligations, what this policy hopefully does is alleviates that confusion by providing clear and absolute clarity around the role and expectations. And again, it is something that really does need to be read by any aspirational council candidate and will be an integral part of councillor training moving forward. Insofar as the Councillor Code of Conduct, Chair, and if I could conclude on this, specifically related to the purpose and intent. And this just sums up, hopefully, what I have just said in my comments in moving this recommendation. Under Clause 2, the purpose and intent states that this code, so this Code of Conduct, specifically specifies the agreed standards of conduct and behaviour required by councillors for the ethical professional performance of their duties under Section 139 of the Local Government Act, and demonstrates the councillor commitment to working together in the best interest of the people within Casey and to perform their responsibilities to the best of their skill and judgment, and mandates that councillor conduct designed to build public confidence with and in the integrity of local government. I don't think it could be more clear. So whilst there are several hundred pages of policies as it relates to Code of Conduct and councillors' involvement as their obligations as involved in their obligations in the planning decision-making process, it is integral reading, and is one that we have been involved with comprehensively in its development, one that we trust has really provided confidence to the organisation as we continue to transition leading up to October 2024. And most importantly, post the election of councillors, provides that confidence, that backbone, that framework that absolutely clearly specifies the ethical requirements around conduct, behaviour and decision-making, and results in a much more effective, productive and professional organisation once we return to elected councillors. So with those words, Chair, I thank many members of staff that have been involved. There's a significant transition team here that have worked tirelessly, not just in looking at the legislative provisions and the model code of conduct, and ensuring that we meeting our obligations based upon the recommendations in standard, etc., but ensuring we're doing this through a practical and professional lens that is absolutely clearly specifying the expectations from all parties, and I am quite confident that that has been achieved, and I really firmly place on the record my thanks to all the staff members involved in this, and encourage every council candidate to read it, to understand it, to ask questions if they need to attend the information sessions, and also for those who are successfully elected to be prepared. It will become part of your ongoing training and your ongoing way that you will conduct yourself in this room. Very pleased to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmont.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Mr Boardman for his comments in moving this motion. I want to really adopt and confirm the comments that have been made by Mr Boardman. The suite of documents that we're moving tonight are fundamental to the future good governance of the City of Casey. The two particular documents which are fundamental and must-read documents for anyone intending to ever be a councillor or to serve as a councillor are the protocols for councillors for land use planning and the councillor code of conduct. And I also want to thank the members of council that have worked on these documents. The reason for these documents coming to light are well known, and I do not intend to rehearse why they've now come into being. But I do want to note and reflect on the fact that legal documents such as these are often criticised for being difficult to read or obtuse or somehow drafted in a way that they're open to misunderstanding or interpretation as to what they actually mean. Now, I have to say that these particular documents, both the Protocol for Councillors, Land Use Planning and the Code, could not be any clearer on their face and are examples of modern and appropriate drafting of these kind of documents. For example, the Protocols for Councillors, Land Use Planning, at Clause 1, the purpose and intent. The purpose of this policy is to, and then the first dot point, reinforce council's role as a planning authority, development of policy and strategy and changes to the Casey planning scheme via planning scheme amendments, and responsible authority considering applications for planning permit against the policies controls within the Casey planning scheme. It could not be a clearer expression of what occurs in the planning process that councils undertake. And then to go on to read from the purpose and intent, ensure decisions are not compromised by premature or ill-informed advice provided to proponents, applicants, objectors or submitters through consistent, transparent and accountable processes. And I don't want to keep making the point, but I have to say to read the expression in a legal document which says that to ensure decisions are not compromised by premature or ill-informed advice, there can be no quibbling with what that means. If you intend to apply to this council for a planning permit, or if you intend to be involved in a planning scheme amendment, this document tells you as a user of this document, and it tells councillors and it tells council staff exactly how they are to conduct themselves. And it is, as I said, written in a very clear manner, and it should be very easy to understand. Just to move on with a couple of more observations about the protocols for council land use planning, I note the references to decision as a planning authority at 4.5 and then at 4.6. And in particular at 4.6, I want to note the reference to all applications are determined by delegation by council officers. Applications are determined against the requirements of the Casey Planning Scheme, which sets the strategic direction of the state and City of Casey through its various requirements. This is an operational aspect of the planning system that relies on technical, thorough and complex assessments. Again, you cannot think of a more clear expression of what is involved in making a planning decision, and I want to note the fact that it is intended under this land use planning policy that decisions are made by council officers and that there is a particular process that is required for them to be called in, and if they are, that a thorough process, which is again set out in this document, is adopted and used in those particular circumstances. And I also want to say that it is not a terrible impost in time to sit and read this. This is basically about 6 pages worth of quite easy to read, quite an easy to read document. It's not going to, if I can speak loosely for a moment, bore anyone to death to try and read this. If you want to be involved in council planning, if you're going to apply to council for a permit, this tells you what is going to happen. And as I said, it's very straightforward to read. And moving on to the Councillor Code of Conduct, again, I want to acknowledge and thank those members of council who have worked on this. It is again a very clear, easy to read document. It is a fundamental document for any future member of council. And for us as well, as we continue in our next few months in this role. And I note the scope of this policy, of this code. This code applies to all councillors appointed to the City of Casey. Councillors will adhere to all relevant laws, regulations and policies, and in particular this code should be read in conjunction with the relevant legislation and council documents referenced in this document. Again, if you become a councillor, you take on responsibility, which is a legal responsibility subject to relevant legislation and policies, and it's your absolute duty to be aware of them. Moving on to the standards of conduct set out in this document, again, there can be no quibbling with what is intended. Clause 5, Standards of Conduct. Councillors acknowledge and agree with the following standards of conduct as specified in Regulation 12 and Schedule 1 of the Local Government Governance and Integrity Regulations 2020. And it sets out 5, and they are treatment of others, performing the role of councillor, compliance to good governance measures. Councillors must not discredit or mislead council or public, and finally, standards do not limit robust political debate. Now, you might think momentarily that it is not appropriate that these sorts of fundamental standards be set out in a document, but in my view it is appropriate, and we know from the work that's been done that's brought us here to this motion that there can sometimes be a misunderstanding of exactly what your role is as a councillor. But this document tells you fundamentally what it is, and for example, a clause such as 5.1, treatment of others. A councillor must, in performing the role of councillor, treat other councillors, members of council staff, the municipal community and members of the public with dignity, fairness, objectivity, courtesy and respect. So again, I don't want to keep belabouring the point. Very simple words, very simple standards set out and fundamental to good governance. I just want to close, Chair, by reflecting on the last of those standards of conduct, which I read out, and that is 5.4, standards do not limit robust political debate. Nothing in these standards is intended to limit, restrict or detract from robust political debate in a democracy. So that is really the fundamental measure of these documents. You can behave in a way that is absolutely within the law, that respects your fellow councillors, that respects the people you work with as council staff, that doesn't detract, and this document is not intended to detract from robust political debate. It's expected that in coming to decisions which are hard fought, there will be times when reasonable minds differ, and it can be that harsh words are used, but these documents, this policy, this code, explains to you that you do that in a manner which is respectful, you do that in a manner which takes into account the people that you're working with and that they are ongoing relationships. And the words used here, robust public debate, that's an invitation to do that, to be a council that's involved in robust public debate, but to do it in a manner that is always respectful. And so with those closing comments and reflection, I'm happy to second this motion, and I look forward to there being robust public debate at Casey, which is always in keeping with this council code of conduct.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I'm not going to add to that by labouring the point because I think you've both comprehensively covered it. Suffice to say that the standard of behaviour across the local government sector does appear to be deteriorating around the state, and that's evidenced by the number of councils where the minister has had to appoint monitors and administrators to oversight the work of elected representatives, which is very disappointing. So this approach is a consolidation of work that we've done over the period of time that we've been here. It does document what I believe to be best practice across the sector, and I think you've both emphasised the importance of this to ensure that good governance and transparent decision-making can prevail at the City of Casey. I do also want to record my appreciation of the work that the governance team have contributed to these documents. It has been a tedious process in reconciling some of the changes, particularly in the context of the changing legislative framework that has recently been introduced, as you've referenced, Mr Boardman. So I do note the appreciation for that, and I also support the motion. I'll put that motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. That concludes the officer reports this afternoon. I move to item 6, which is consideration of reports of committees. We've now transitioned to page 370 of the council reports, and I merely note the record of discussion as listed in the agenda papers. Item 7, petitions. There are none for this council meeting. Item 8, late reports. There are no late reports. Item 9, urgent business. There is none. Item 10, closed council. There are no reports for this council meeting. So that leaves me to formally declare the council meeting closed. I thank those members of the community who've attended this afternoon for enduring the discussion and listening, much appreciated, and those also listening online. So I formally close the meeting. I just have one further note, and that is that there was a special council meeting scheduled for the 28th of May, which has been cancelled. That was to specifically hear submissions to the budget, council plan, annual action plan, the draft financial plan, draft capital works plan for the next year and 10 years hence. And the draft schedule of fees and charges. That meeting is not going to be scheduled because there were no submissions to that process. So that won't be necessary. It is a requirement if people do want to be heard to hear that, but there's been none submitted. So the final documents will be presented to Council for endorsement at the next regular Council meeting, which is on the 18th of June. So once again, thank you all and good evening.